main issue, which I would call the elephant in the room for Africa, is the high indebtedness, where the African countries are paying close to 100 billion every year in terms of the interest rate. There is less to be invested in the social safety nets, in health, in education, in other areas. And at the same time, it causes macroeconomic imbalance because you are paying it in hard currency, using your local currency, meaning that your reserves go down and you don't have extra excess to be able to intervene in the market and provide the hard currency for people who are importing goods and services. And what we are trying to do now is how do we address this issue of debt, which used to be sort of within the context of the high indebted poor countries, especially using the Paris Club, which are the members that really had much of the biggest debt, and they had a formula on how to address it. But now there are many lenders. There are non-Paris Club members. There is also the private sector. Now, who brings everybody together to make sure that we can address this issue? So the common framework that was developed by the G20 is not very effective, and so many recommendations have been given, including what has been given by the group of experts put together by the Secretary General, that came up with 11 different recommendations, which make sense. And I think that would be a solution if they apply really the way they have been recommended.
The UN-led tax convention, which UNECA has been a driving force behind it, and it is present in the document. What is the crucial next operational step to turn this political success into a treaty with real enforcement powers?
When you are trading with member countries, when you are promoting investment, you need this tax convention. If your investors come to my country or to go to another country, they have to have similar treatment in terms of taxation. So that means that we need to agree together. Although there has been political agreement, but we need to break it down. And that's why it will come within a resolution that's going to be adopted at the United Nations level. That's going to bind everyone. We have given ideas. Other countries are giving ideas. But also, we as the Economic Commission for Africa go deep into the technical details that would help in terms of making it easier and meaningful in terms of implementation.
And beyond the international fight against the IFF, what does instead UNECA consider to be the main internal reform that African countries must undertake to expand their tax bases? And how does UNECA's work on supporting the IFCFTA implementation directly link to the domestic resource mobilization agenda in order to create a virtuous circle between trade, formalization of the economy, and fiscal capacity?
That's a very, very good question. Number one, because of the aid that was cheap, it has made some countries maybe lazy to mobilize their own resources. And I think now they realize that the aid has gone down, the debt is so high, and the investment is less than 3% this year. The only alternative is to develop your own domestic resources. That means the taxation. How do you do it right? How do you make sure that actually you simplify the taxes for everyone? How do you give capacity to the tax administrator? How do you digitize the whole economy so that everybody pays their share? And how do you bring in the informal sector so that they are now formed? They are now 82% across the continent. And at the same time, what kind of incentives do you give those people who are coming to invest? Sometimes, so we are saying and are assisting them how to do it right. That's number one. These are revenues coming to government. But also we are saying revenues to government alone is not enough. We also need revenues to the private sector. That means the establishment of the capital market. Ours are so small, they are fragmented. You need to build a proper capital market so that they can help in terms of generating long-term resources for the private sector. Secondly, you need to trade. We've been trading more with outside world than within Africa. In Africa, it has been on average 15% intra-Africa trades. And then we established this Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Initially, it started with regional economic communities. There are 8 of them across the continent, whereby you would have a free trade area within each of the regional economic communities. Now we said, from this experience that we have learned, how do we come up with one market for the entire continent, 54 countries, so that we can trade among each other? There's no way government alone can invest and grow. We need the private sector. And we at the Economic Commission for Africa are saying, yes, we need regional value chains. We have identified 94 of them. And they say if you can start with this one, then it goes across the countries. It will help us to build industries so that we can stop exporting raw materials or semi-finished goods. So that now we can attract the private sector, de-risk those investments, and then bring in anybody who wants to make money. Because to be clear, because what they fear is risk, but once the risk is taken out, then at least we can now mobilize more of the private sector. That's why we are saying the future is private sector.
Multiple reports are highlighting African investment paradox: high returns against a very high risk perception fueled by rating agencies. Beyond calling for global reform, what are the concrete African-led solutions that UNECA is supporting to address this issue?
First of all, we are helping to create the Africa Credit Rating Agency. Nobody said there has to be 3 in the whole world. And secondly, how are they regulated? Thirdly, they don't have presence on the ground. If you don't have an understanding of the technical details of the country, the background, the context, how are you supposed to give a fair deal in terms of rating? And the problem is that whatever you give out, that's what everybody goes back. But then you wonder, if Africa is so risky, how many companies or countries have defaulted? They are the lowest compared to Europe, compared to North America. So if they have not defaulted, how now do you say they are very, very risky? So that's why we are saying there has to be others. China has had now its own rating agency, Japan has its own rating agency, and Africa is having its own rating agency. Now with this kind of rating agencies, now we can see transparency into how you do evaluation for me. And then on the other hand, we are providing capacity to member countries so that they can really improve their credit rating. So that's what we do. We are together with UNDP and others, but at the same time, we're also supporting countries on macroeconomic management. We are supporting them on domestic revenue mobilization. We are supporting countries on the regional value chain. We are helping them to standardize them so that they can conform to the international standards, the WTO rules. We work on climate, we work on technology, we work on poverty reduction, we work on statistics. We are the ones coordinating the entire continent and providing the standards in terms of the statistics. Because we need statistics, not only the traditional ones, but new ones that are needed by the private sector.
How much do African countries in general suffer from the US leaving the financing for development?
That's a wake-up call for countries to look at other sources of finance. Because if you rely on one donor for a big chunk of your financing, you know you are at risk. At some point, you have to diversify your domestic resources, the private sector resources, and also other partners, so that you don't rely on one. That's the biggest lesson that we are seeing. But in terms of impact for the UN, I think it's paying more than 13 billion, which that means the money which was supposed to be helping member countries, they are no longer being helped. The other one is also the tariffs that were put there for many countries, including African countries. We have done an analysis. We have discussed with our member countries to show the alternative. You can go to Asia. You can go to Middle East. You can trade within Africa. The UK, the France, Germany, and some others. They also aid is declining. It's not in the United States. And we are telling African countries we have to find alternatives. And some of the alternatives are those domestic resource mobilization that we are talking about. And others, of course, providing incentives and crowding in the private sector.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.